I remember the exact chill in the air that morning, a crisp southern autumn day that felt deceptively normal. At 45, I was at the peak of my career, or so I thought, having dedicated over 2 decades to Sterling and Company, a venerable institution in downtown Atlanta. My role as senior marketing director wasn't just a job, it was a part of my identity. I'd always navigated the subtle currents of a traditional corporate culture, one where progress was often whispered rather than declared. As a Black woman in a predominantly white, male-dominated leadership, I was accustomed to proving myself twice over. Yet, I believe my work spoke for itself, loud and clear. Mr. Sterling, our CEO, always presented himself as a champion of diversity, his speeches polished and progressive. But behind the veneer, I often sensed a quiet skepticism, a hidden judgment in his eyes that I couldn't quite place. It was a feeling I'd learned to ignore, focusing instead on my achievements. The meeting request came unexpectedly, a last-minute addition to my already packed calendar. Urgent discussion regarding departmental strategy, the email read, from Mr. Sterling's assistant. My stomach tightened slightly. These unscheduled summons rarely brought good news. Walking into his expansive office, the city skyline stretching out behind him, I felt a familiar surge of professional readiness. He sat across from me, his expression unreadable, a stark contrast to his usual boisterous demeanor. The air felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. "Naomi," he began, his voice devoid of its usual warmth, "we've had to make some difficult decisions regarding our talent management strategy." The phrase hung in the air, a corporate euphemism that immediately put me on edge. My mind raced, trying to anticipate his next words. He continued, "While your contributions have been noted, we've decided to move in a different direction. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." The words hit me like a physical blow, stripping the air from my lungs. I stared at him, utterly stunned. Eliminated? After 20 years? My mind struggled to reconcile the statement with my unwavering dedication and recent successes. Just last quarter, my team had spearheaded a campaign that boosted our regional market share by 15%. Talent management, he repeated, almost as if to reassure himself, is about ensuring we have the right people in the right roles for our future growth. His gaze was distant, avoiding mine, a clear sign of discomfort. It felt like a rehearsed script. I managed to find my voice, though it was barely a whisper. "Mr. Sterling, I don't understand. My performance reviews have always been exemplary. My team consistently exceeds targets. What direction are we moving in that doesn't include my expertise?" He offered a vague, dismissive wave of his hand. "It's not about performance, Naomi. It's about a broader restructuring. A new vision. We need fresh perspectives to lead us forward." The words felt hollow, a flimsy excuse for something far more sinister. My mind reeled, trying to grasp the enormity of what was happening. 45 years old, and suddenly I was being discarded, not for incompetence, but for some nebulous new vision. The injustice burned, a hot, bitter taste in my mouth. He handed me a severance package document, his movements precise and detached. "HR will walk you through the details. We wish you all the best in your future endeavors." The platitude felt like an insult, a final, condescending dismissal. As I walked out of his office, the faces of my colleagues blurred around me. The vibrant energy of the office, once a source of pride, now felt alien and hostile. I clutched the document, its weight a stark reminder of my sudden, bewildering unemployment. The world outside felt different, sharper, as if a protective layer had been stripped away. I was sacked, dismissed without a valid reason, and a chilling suspicion began to form. This wasn't just about talent management. This was personal and deeply wrong. The first few days after my dismissal were a blur of disbelief and raw emotion. I replayed the conversation with Mr. Sterling countless times, searching for a hidden meaning, a logical explanation that simply wasn't there. The phrase talent management echoed in my mind, a mocking refrain. My phone, usually buzzing with work calls and emails, fell silent. Colleagues who had been friendly just days before now seemed to avoid my calls or offered hesitant, awkward sympathies. The sudden isolation was jarring, amplifying my sense of betrayal. I tried to make sense of it, poring over my past performance reviews, which were consistently glowing. My contributions to Sterling and Company were undeniable, from streamlining our digital campaigns to mentoring junior staff. There was no professional basis for this decision. The official letter from HR was equally vague, reiterating the strategic restructuring and alignment with future goals. It was a masterpiece of corporate speak, designed to say everything and nothing, leaving me with more questions than answers. My initial anger slowly began to morph into a cold, determined resolve. This wasn't just about losing a job. It felt like an erasure of my professional identity, a dismissal rooted in something deeper than business strategy. I refused to accept it at face value. I thought about the subtle microaggressions I'd endured over the years, the surprised looks when I spoke with authority, the assumptions about my background, the way my ideas sometimes needed to be represented by a male colleague to gain traction. I'd always brushed them off as minor annoyances. But now, in the harsh light of unemployment, these small slights took on a new, ominous significance. Was this dismissal the culmination of those veiled prejudices? Was talent management a convenient cloak for something far more insidious? I remembered a recent incident during a leadership retreat. Mr. Sterling had made an offhand comment about cultural fit when discussing a new hire, glancing pointedly in my direction. At the time, I dismissed it as an awkward moment. Now, it felt like a coded message, a subtle warning I had failed to heed. The traditional corporate culture of the South, which I had always navigated with careful diplomacy, suddenly felt like a suffocating blanket, revealing its true oppressive nature. I reached out to a former colleague, Marcus, who had left Sterling and Company a few years prior. He listened patiently, his voice filled with empathy. "Naomi," he said, "that place has a way of chewing people up and spitting them out, especially those who challenge the unspoken rules." He didn't offer concrete answers, but his words validated my growing suspicion that my dismissal wasn't an isolated incident. There was a pattern, a systemic issue that went beyond my individual performance. The company had a history. I started reviewing news articles about Sterling and Company, looking for any public controversies or internal shifts. Most reports were positive, focusing on growth and expansion, but a few mentioned executive departures that had been quietly handled. The more I searched, the more a sense of unease settled over me. It was like looking at a perfectly manicured lawn and suddenly noticing tiny, almost invisible cracks in the foundation. Something was amiss, just out of plain sight. I felt a growing conviction that I was not just a victim of corporate restructuring. There was a deeper, darker truth lurking beneath the surface, a truth that Mr. Sterling and his leadership team were desperate to keep hidden. The injustice of my situation fueled a fire within me. I wouldn't just move on. I would uncover the real reason behind my abrupt dismissal, not just for myself, but for anyone else who might have been, or would be, similarly wronged. The initial shock began to recede, replaced by a sharp, investigative focus. I knew I couldn't just accept the official narrative. My gut screamed that there was more to the story, a hidden agenda masked by corporate jargon. My first step was to review my company emails, specifically those related to my projects and performance. I noticed a subtle shift in tone from Mr. Sterling in the last few months. His feedback, once constructive, had become increasingly vague or non-existent. He had also started assigning my most visible projects to a younger, less experienced male colleague, Mark. At the time, I'd assumed it was part of a mentorship initiative, but now it felt like a deliberate sidelining. I recall the conversation with Mark just weeks before my termination. He'd seemed unusually stressed, muttering something about pressure from above to streamline operations and make room for new blood. His words now resonated with a chilling clarity. I decided to observe the company from the outside. I drove past the Sterling and Company building at odd hours, watching the lights, trying to sense a change in its rhythm. It felt like a fortress, impenetrable, yet I knew secrets lay within its walls. One evening, I saw Mark leaving the office exceptionally late, his shoulders slumped. He looked exhausted, burdened. It was unusual for him, given his earlier hours. This small detail ignited a new spark of curiosity. I remembered a company-wide memo about a new diversity and inclusion initiative launched just a month before my firing. It felt performative at the time, a box-ticking exercise, but now it seemed almost ironic, given my situation. Could my dismissal be linked to this initiative in some twisted way? Was I, a visible black woman in a senior role being removed to make space for someone else, perhaps to fulfill a different kind of diversity quota or to avoid genuine change. I started connecting with former Sterling and Company employees on LinkedIn, casually inquiring about their experiences after leaving the company. Many expressed relief, citing a stifling atmosphere or lack of upward mobility for certain demographics. One former colleague, Sarah, mentioned that Mr. Sterling had a habit of clearing out long-term employees just before major company announcements. She couldn't elaborate, but her cryptic warning fueled my growing suspicion. He likes to control the narrative, she'd said. And sometimes, that means removing people who know too much or who don't fit into his carefully constructed image. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I began to suspect that talent management was a smokescreen for something far more calculated. It wasn't just about my race or my age, but a convergence of factors that made me an inconvenient presence. The veil of corporate politeness was slowly lifting, revealing a darker underbelly. I felt like a detective, piecing together fragments of information, each one adding to a mosaic of deceit and manipulation. My initial despair had transformed into a quiet determination. I wasn't just investigating my own dismissal, I was uncovering the true nature of the company I had once so proudly served. The truth, I knew, was waiting to be found. My investigation began in earnest, though discreetly. I knew I couldn't confront Mr. Sterling directly. He would simply deny everything and shut me down. I needed concrete evidence, something undeniable. I started by focusing on Mark, the colleague who had taken over my key projects. I knew he was ambitious, but also seemed genuinely decent. I wondered if he was aware of the true implications of his new responsibilities. I remembered Mark mentioning a new, highly confidential project that was top secret and involved major restructuring. He had seemed uncomfortable discussing it, which now struck me as significant. I decided to try a different approach, a casual coffee meeting with Mark, ostensibly to catch up, and offer him some advice on his new role. I hoped to glean information without raising his suspicions. He agreed, and we met at a small, unassuming cafe a few blocks from the office. He looked even more stressed than before, dark circles under his eyes. "It's been crazy since you left, Naomi," he admitted, stirring his coffee. I asked about the new projects, feigning interest in their scope. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "There's a lot of pressure to cut costs, Naomi. Deep cuts, and not just in marketing." His eyes darted around nervously. "Cost cuts?" I questioned, feigning surprise. "But Sterling and Company has been reporting record profits. And what about the new diversity initiative? That usually requires investment, not cuts." He leaned closer. "That's the thing. The D&I initiative is, well, it's mostly for show. The real focus is on a massive asset liquidation. They're selling off entire departments, Naomi." Quietly, my heart pounded. Asset liquidation. This was a far cry from talent management. This was a systemic dismantling disguised as strategic growth. The pieces were starting to fall into place. He continued, "They're targeting departments with older employees or those with higher salaries. They call it optimizing the workforce. You were just one of the first, Naomi. A pilot case for the new strategy." The words hit me with a sickening clarity. It wasn't just racism, though that was undoubtedly a factor in their targeting. It was a cold, calculated financial move, using talent management as a convenient, plausible deniability. "And the racist leader part?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Sterling, he's been very clear about wanting a younger, more adaptable workforce. And, frankly, a less diverse one, despite what he says publicly." He added, he believes older, more established employees, especially those from diverse backgrounds, are less flexible and more resistant to change. He sees them as liabilities, not assets. This was the first concrete clue, a chilling revelation that connected the dots between my age, my race, and the company's true hidden agenda. I wasn't fired for incompetence. I was a casualty of a cynical corporate purge. I thanked Mark, my mind racing with the implications. The truth was far more complex and disturbing than I had imagined. It wasn't just about me, it was about a pattern of systemic discrimination and financial manipulation. Armed with Mark's revelation, my investigation gained a new, urgent momentum. The talent management facade had crumbled, revealing a far more sinister plot. A calculated asset liquidation disguised by ageist and racist biases. I began searching for public records related to Sterling and Company's recent property acquisitions and sales. It was difficult to trace, as many transactions were buried under shell corporations or vague LLCs. However, a deep dive into obscure financial news sites and local property records revealed a pattern. Several smaller, less profitable subsidiaries of Sterling and Company have been quietly sold off in the past year. These sales were always framed as strategic divestitures or streamlining operations in the limited press releases. But now, I saw them as part of a larger, systematic purge. I also noticed a significant increase in executive bonuses, particularly for Mr. Sterling and his inner circle, tied to cost-saving initiatives. My dismissal, and that of others, directly contributed to their financial gains. The diversity and inclusion initiative, once a source of mild skepticism, now appeared as a cynical smokescreen. It was a public relations stunt designed to deflect attention from the actual, discriminatory practices within the company. I remembered a few older, highly experienced colleagues who had also voluntarily retired or moved on to new opportunities in recent months. Their departures, once seen as natural career transitions, now seemed suspicious. I contacted an investigative journalist I knew from a past charity event, a sharp woman named Chloe who specialized in corporate malfeasance. I presented her with my suspicions and the few pieces of evidence I had gathered. Chloe listened intently, her expression growing serious as I spoke. "Naomi," she said, "this sounds like a classic asset stripping operation where a company liquidates its valuable parts for short-term profit, often at the expense of its workforce." She confirmed that the talent management and diversity narratives were often used to justify such purges, making them appear progressive while hiding the true, exploitative motives. It was a common, albeit unethical, tactic. Chloe agreed to look into it, but warned me that exposing a company like Sterling and Company would be a monumental task. They had deep pockets and powerful legal teams. "You'll need undeniable proof, Naomi," she stressed. Her words fueled my determination. I wasn't just fighting for my job anymore. I was fighting for justice, for all the unseen victims of this corporate deception. The truth, however painful, needed to be brought to light. I continued to dig, searching for internal memos, financial reports, anything that could directly link Mr. Sterling to the scheme. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack, but I was relentless. The more I uncovered, the more disgusted I became. The company I had poured my life into was rotten at its core, its leadership driven by greed and a callous disregard for its loyal employees. 5 days after my dismissal, the truth finally coalesced, revealing a shocking layer of deception I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about ageism or racism in a general sense. It was a deeply personal, calculated betrayal. Chloe, the investigative journalist, called me late one evening, her voice hushed with urgency. "Naomi, I found something. It's bigger than just asset stripping. It involves a hostile takeover attempt." She explained that Mr. Sterling wasn't just liquidating assets for short-term profit. He was systematically devaluing Sterling and Company to make it vulnerable for a hostile takeover by a rival firm. "And guess who's behind the rival firm?" Chloe asked, a pause for dramatic effect. "A holding company owned by Mr. Sterling's estranged brother, who he's been in a bitter family feud with for years." My jaw dropped. This wasn't just a corporate scheme. It was a family vendetta played out on the backs of unsuspecting employees. Mr. Sterling was sabotaging his own company, sacrificing loyal staff to spite his brother. The talent management and restructuring were merely smokescreens to remove experienced, high-salaried employees who might resist the takeover or expose the deliberate devaluing of the company. My dismissal, specifically, was a targeted move. Mr. Sterling knew I was meticulous, financially savvy, and deeply loyal to the company's true mission. I was a threat to his plan, someone who might uncover his treachery. The veiled racism and ageism were not just biases, they were tools. They allowed him to justify removing people like me, making it seem like a legitimate business decision rather than a malicious act of sabotage. Chloe had found internal communications, leaked by a disgruntled junior executive, detailing Mr. Sterling's plan to optimize the workforce by targeting legacy employees and non-essential departments. The documents also contained coded references to his brother's company, outlining how the devalued assets would be acquired at a fraction of their true worth, consolidating power and wealth within his own faction of the family. The shock was profound. I had expected to uncover corporate greed or systemic discrimination, but not this intricate web of familial revenge and corporate espionage. My personal injustice was a small piece of a much larger, darker puzzle. I felt a surge of cold fury. He hadn't just fired me, he had used me, and countless others, as pawns in his personal war. The man who preached diversity was a master manipulator, willing to destroy his own company for spite. Chloe advised me to gather any remaining personal files, contacts, or project details I had from my time at Sterling and Company. "This is going to be big, Naomi," she warned. "And you're at the center of it." The truth was far more terrifying and exhilarating than I could have imagined. It wasn't just about my job anymore. It was about exposing a massive corporate fraud and a deeply personal vendetta. The weight of this revelation was immense, but so was the clarity it brought. I was no longer a victim. I was a witness, armed with knowledge that could bring down a powerful man and expose a rotten empire. The full weight of the revelation settled upon me, heavy and chilling. Mr. Sterling's actions were not merely racist or ageist. They were an elaborate scheme to devalue Sterling and Company for a hostile takeover orchestrated by his own family. My initial anger transformed into a steely resolve. This wasn't just about my personal injustice. It was about exposing a corporate betrayal that affected countless employees and stakeholders. I had to act. Chloe and I met again, this time with a legal expert she recommended, a sharp attorney specializing in corporate fraud and whistleblowing cases. We laid out all the evidence: Mark's testimony, Chloe's leaked documents, and my own observations. The attorney, Miss Davies, listened intently, her expression grim. "This is a strong case, Naomi," she stated, "but it will be a battle. Mr. Sterling will fight tooth and nail to protect his reputation and his scheme." She explained the legal complexities, proving a hostile takeover attempt disguised as legitimate business decisions, especially when intertwined with family feuds, would require meticulous evidence and strategic timing. My role, she advised, would be crucial. As a long-term, high-ranking employee who was unjustly dismissed under false pretenses, I was a credible witness with direct experience of the company's internal workings. The implications for Mr. Sterling were severe: potential charges of corporate fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and significant financial penalties. His carefully constructed public image would shatter. I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Fear of the powerful forces I was about to challenge, but exhilaration at the prospect of finally bringing truth to light, no matter the personal cost. Miss Davies outlined a plan. First, to gather more irrefutable evidence, then to approach the relevant regulatory bodies and, if necessary, the press. Secrecy was paramount until we were ready to strike. I spent the next few days meticulously organizing every piece of information I had: old emails, project reports, even casual notes from meetings that now held new meaning. Every detail became a potential weapon. I also reached out to a few other former colleagues who had been dismissed under similar talent management pretexts. Their stories, once disparate, now formed a clear, damning pattern when viewed through the lens of Mr. Sterling's scheme. Their individual experiences of injustice, combined with the evidence of corporate sabotage, painted a damning picture of a leader who prioritized personal vendetta over corporate integrity and employee welfare. The thought of confronting Mr. Sterling, not just about my dismissal, but about his entire deceitful operation, filled me with a quiet satisfaction. He had underestimated me, assuming I would simply fade away. But I was not fading. I was gathering strength, building a case, preparing to expose the truth that he had so carefully buried under layers of corporate jargon and veiled prejudice. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges, but I felt a renewed sense of purpose. My dismissal, once a devastating blow, had become the catalyst for uncovering a much larger injustice. The decision was clear. I would not simply seek personal compensation. My purpose had evolved beyond that. I would expose Mr. Sterling's scheme, not just for myself, but for every employee he had wronged and for the integrity of the company I had once believed in. Working closely with Chloe and Ms. Davies, we meticulously compiled a comprehensive dossier. It included leaked internal documents, financial analyses showing the deliberate devaluation of assets, and testimonies from other unjustly dismissed employees. The evidence was overwhelming, painting a picture of calculated corporate sabotage driven by a personal vendetta. The talent management excuse, once vague, now stood as a transparent lie, a cover for deep-seated malice. Instead of immediately going public, Ms. Davies advised a strategic, quiet approach. We presented our findings to the board of directors of Sterling & Company, bypassing Mr. Sterling entirely. The board, initially skeptical, grew increasingly alarmed as they reviewed the irrefutable evidence. The scale of Mr. Sterling's deception and the potential legal and financial repercussions for the company quickly became apparent. The revelation of his plan to facilitate a hostile takeover by his estranged brother's company, using the company's own assets and employees as collateral, was the ultimate betrayal. It shattered their trust. Within days, Mr. Sterling was placed on immediate administrative leave, followed swiftly by his forced resignation. The official announcement cited irreconcilable differences in strategic vision, a final, ironic twist of corporate euphemism. The news spread like wildfire through the corporate world. While the full, scandalous details of the family feud and hostile takeover attempt were initially kept under wraps, the sudden downfall of Mr. Sterling raised many questions. My name, once associated with a quiet dismissal, was now whispered as the catalyst for his demise. I chose to remain largely out of the public eye, letting the legal and corporate processes unfold. The surprising outcome was not a direct legal battle for me, but a quiet victory. The company, reeling from the scandal, offered me a significant settlement and an apology, acknowledging the misjudgment in my dismissal. More importantly, the board initiated a full internal review, promising to address the systemic issues of ageism, racism, and lack of transparency that Mr. Sterling had exploited. This was the true vindication. As for me, the experience had irrevocably changed my path. I realized my passion lay not in climbing the corporate ladder, but in helping others navigate its treacherous terrain. I started a consulting firm, specializing in corporate ethics and employee advocacy, using my first-hand experience to guide businesses toward more equitable practices and empower employees facing similar injustices. My sacking at 45, once a devastating blow, became the unexpected catalyst for a new, purposeful career. The truth, once hidden, had set me free, leading me to a path I never would have imagined. Mr. Sterling's racist and manipulative talent management had backfired spectacularly, not only costing him his empire but inadvertently empowering me to build my own, founded on integrity and justice.